Welcome to the Rational Alternative. I'm your host, Michael Liebowitz, and this is our very first episode recording for the Rational Alternative. And we have an absolutely great guest, Nikos Sotirakopoulos, PhD, historian, all around brilliant guy, great communicator. Nikos, welcome.
Thank you. I'm an amateur historian, but because the part of my job that I enjoy the most is reading and understanding stuff and diving into stuff, and I want to know how to become a better reader, to put it very simply. And I was impressed by the volume of books that you have read. I know most of them happened while you were in prison, and I have a lot of questions about that stuff. There are going to be some weird questions, so some people might find them, oh, that's too technical or that's too nerdy. To be honest, I don't care. There's a very good chance today's episode is not going to make a great YouTube content, but it will be important content for me and the few people out there who will understand why this is valuable.
Well, Nikos gave it away. He's going to be interviewing me, and I disagree. I think it's going to be valuable, and I think people are going to like to see it. You are free, Nikos, to ask me anything you want, and I will answer. So without further ado, go ahead.
So first of all, so that people understand what I'm talking about, can you estimate how many books you've read, let's say in the last quarter of a century, approximately?
In prison, I happen to know the exact number. I have it written down downstairs. I believe, but I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's about 650 books in prison, not including an associate's degree in psychology, an associate's in paralegal studies, certificate in psychology and social work, and a certificate in drug and alcohol counseling.
For which I assume you also had to do extra reading, like papers and stuff.
Sure. Because I was getting confirmation on that through the degrees and the certificates, I didn't include those under the books I've read. And I've been out of prison now for 3.5 years, and I've stopped keeping track. Let's say I've read, since I've been out of prison, I don't know, 12 or 15 books and countless articles.
Okay, so we're talking about 700, let's say, approximately books, which is actually impressive. So the first question that I have is, actually, I'm going to start with the difficult question. This is a question that some people might sense that it's insensitive, and I haven't gotten your approval to ask it. But today, with all the distractions, someone could think, could it be that prison was, let's say, a privileged environment for concentration and for reading, whereas the life we live with this type of stuff makes it more difficult to concentrate? Did you experience it like that?
So in some ways that would be accurate. In other ways it wouldn't. So absolutely, it gave me free time that most people don't have, in which I can read. The difficulty, however, of reading in that environment is difficult to overstate. You've got guys, I don't know if you can imagine, I don't want to do it because it'll aggravate me, but slamming plastic dominoes off wood tables all day long. So you're trying to read, and that's intermittent. So if you have a constant noise, you can kind of get used to it. You become acclimated and can read. But when it's bang, bang, it's constantly interrupting you. Plus, in prison, you have screaming and yelling virtually all day long by the inmates, which makes it very difficult to concentrate. And if you get a cellmate that's difficult, that wants to listen to his music or wants to watch TV with the volume on, whatever, that can impede it as well. So in that sense, it's very difficult to do. But it's undeniable that it does free up an immense amount of time that a person would have to read. That said, in prison, I think I read on average 4 to 5 hours a day. I still out here read about 3 hours a day. So it's not like I've just fallen off a cliff. I just don't read books as much because I have to prepare, for instance, for the Capitalist Corner every day. So I'm reading 2-3 hours of articles when I get up in the morning.
Okay, that's to be on a spoiler alert, I kind of knew the answer because I remember what you said in another interview or in your book about the noise. So my next question would be, how do you overcome this? Here we live in the comfort of urban civilization, and if there's wind and something is banging, we're like, oh, that's it, I can't concentrate. So how do you overcome this, and how do you say, still within this most inhospitable environment for concentration? So the good thing is you don't have a million other things to do, but also there are all these distractions. So how did you get over this? How did you manage to concentrate?
Well, oftentimes I couldn't, but there were certain things you can do. For instance, we'd put something underneath the door, a bathrobe underneath the door, because the door is open at the bottom, maybe about an inch. So you put something there that helps to block the noise. Sometimes you could get earplugs, so that would help to fight the noise as well. I sometimes would put on headphones with music, like classical music. That's just like the constant type of noise we talked about, or just fight through it. Now, if you're reading something that's simple, it's not really a problem. When I'm reading stuff like human action, where you have to constantly hold things constant to, or Objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand, things of that nature, or Immanuel Kant, Critique of Pure Reason, it becomes very frustrating. And I mean, I wish I could say that I handled it well, but oftentimes I'd be flat out pissed, aggravated, but what was the alternative? Not to read, not to study, not to grow. And there was a lot of self-improvement stuff helped me in this as far as persistence goes, like Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. I can't. I've read countless amounts of self-improvement books. Message to Garcia was great. I don't know if you've ever read Message to Garcia, Nikos.
No.
If you haven't, read it. It'd take you about 10 minutes. You could find it on the internet by Elbert Hubbard. If you read just that and nothing else, that will greatly inspire you. Seven Habits of Highly Effective People.
I haven't even heard of it. So I like old style self-improvement. I like listening to 80s programs from Zig Ziglar, for example, mostly to improve myself as a public speaker. Yeah. But I never came across this.
You'll love it.
I'll check it out already. So I was about to tell you, I'm gonna check it out while I'm gonna be watching the World Cup on the background. So I think the reason many people have idealized, let's say, the environment of a monastery or of prison, not so much when it comes to intellectual work, mostly in terms of building a physique, all that stuff, is they envision it as an environment which today is unimaginable in terms of not having distractions. But as you said, it's an environment full of distractions, and actually it's an environment of high stress. There's no chance that the stress that you get from, quote, stress from wanting to check Twitter is bigger than the stress that you have in such an environment. So I wanted to get this out of the way because I think that the key to your productivity was not that you were in prison and you didn't have anything else to do.
Also, for a large portion of my prison sentence, I worked 6 hours a day. I actually went to a job 6 hours a day. For another 3 years of my sentence, I used to work third shift. So you're going to work at 11:30 at night. Sometimes, you get back at 12, sometimes 1, sometimes 2, 3, whatever. But that greatly disrupted my sleep. So it wasn't just like, oh, you have nothing to do, just sit around and read. Plus, there's television that I could be watching, radio that I could be listening to, video games, board games, all types of things that you can distract yourself with. I mean, not to pick on you, but you just said that you're going to be watching the World Cup, right? I'm not watching the World Cup. I'm not watching the NBA Finals. I'm not watching the World Series. I'm not watching baseball games. The only real television that I'll watch, my girlfriend, because I have to pay attention to her at some point. So at nighttime, we'll watch an hour of TV a day. That's about the gist of my television watching.
Makes sense. Yeah. And again, when I say there's something romantic to this, it's also because, for example, you read Malcolm X. My favorite part in this book is how he changes his whole life in prison. And part of this is he's reading at night. He's trying to put the book somewhere where there is some light. So I think it's impossible to read this, or even the Count of Monte Cristo, who becomes a different person like that. So
do you like how do you like how Malcolm X used to conk his hair? Do you remember that part?
Yes, but now I don't remember exactly. I remember it was so alien to me. I had to Google it. I didn't know what this means.
I believe the section is lied, fried, and to the side, if I'm not mistaken. It's about what they do to their hair to make it like straighten out the hair. And
I had to Google it, and it felt so weird and another planet. I didn't know this was the case. So, what was your schedule, let's say, back then at your most productive days? When would you do your reading? What was the day like? And then I want to transition to today and ask some more questions about how did you retain the volume of information that you consumed. But give us, what was, let's say, the average schedule, and how does it relate to today's schedule?
It's hard to say because it switches around, especially when there's different rec schedules. But basically, I did the same thing in prison that I do now. My free time consisted of either exercising, engaging in productive discussions, or reading. When locked in the cell, I would be reading, except for in the morning, I would watch the first news. So, the 7 o'clock morning news would come on.
So what time would the day start?
That would depend on what prison I was in and where I was working. But you get up for breakfast. That's at like 6:30. So I would get up before that, have a cup of coffee, watch the morning news, go to breakfast, come back, maybe catch the 7 o'clock news before I'd be watching the local news, go to work, and then get out of work, read, go to dinner, read, go to rec, read, and then watch a little television before bed. But that's basically it, is free time. I've learned that, you have these moments in life, right? Like, I'll give you an example. This morning I woke up, I went to bed at, I don't know, a little after 10 last night. I woke up at 12:30 and I couldn't get back to sleep. So finally, at 2 o'clock, I said to myself, you know what? I'm laying here. I'm not getting a damn thing done. Whereas I could get up and I can prepare for what I have to do for the day. I'm going to be up either way, right? So I got up and I read. Mark and I today are covering George Washington, for instance, on the Capitalist Corner. So I read about 5 articles on George Washington. And I also remember
there's already morning if you read 5 articles at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, that took me till about 4 reading those 5 articles. Then I thought about the stuff that you and I have been talking about in your article about urgency and the liberty movement, about there needs to be a sense of urgency. And it reminded me of an old article I had from Ayn Rand, To All Innocent Fifth Columnists. So I thought, wow, that would be a good part of today's show as well. So I read that. That took me to about 4:30. And then I figured, okay, I can get back to sleep for a little while. So I went back to sleep till 7:30. Then I woke up. I read a few more articles. I went out and got coffee, and I got my girlfriend a croissant, myself a bagel while I was in the parking lot. I read another article from Reason Magazine on J.D. Vance. Basically, he's a right-wing socialist. In effect, that's what the article was about.
I was just tweeting about this 10 minutes before we started, basically.
So then I came back. I come in here. And I needed to change so I could get this rational alternative insignia that's in the top right here. I had to make that. I had to make the thumbnail for today's show with Mark. And of course, come in here and get ready for you. And then you and I had a 20-minute conversation before coming on. My point is that when I have spare time, I try not to just leave it dead. Right. So one of the things that drives me crazy is dead time. So my day job that pays me, I'm a real estate title searcher. Normally, all that consists of real estate title searcher. So I find out what's the address of the home. When was it built? Is it connected to public sewer, or is it private well, private septic? Was an underground oil tank ever removed? Most of the time I can do that from right here. I can call the town halls. I have the computer. Once in a while, though, I have to go to a town hall. So the other day I had to go to a town hall. So it's an hour drive there, an hour drive back in 45 minutes there. So let's say let's be not exaggerating. So let me say 2.5 hours, maybe. I hate that because that's 2.5 hours of virtual dead time.
Enter audible, right?
Right. Not getting anything accomplished. So what I try to do in those times is just put on right-wing talk radio. So at least I'm getting something from the culture, something that's giving me information. But again, it's not for me about having a specific schedule. It's about when I have time, make use of the time.
That's my biggest takeaway from what you said, that it's not that you were sitting for 4 hours like a Buddha in full. It's different parts of the day, 1 hour here, 1 hour there. And that's, I think, the message. And what you said about the traffic, audiobooks and Audible has changed my relationship to being stuck in the traffic. I don't care anymore about the traffic. I know this is going to be a productive time. And something else I wanted to ask is, if you read about do a podcast 2 hours later, okay, retention is simple, you keep some notes. How did you retain when you read Kant or Mises or this article by Ayn Rand? What's your process of?
I want to show you.
So as this is not a waste of a time.
Okay. This is my copy of Objectivism, the Philosophy of Ayn Rand. You see how it's falling apart? I've probably read it 30 times. So I've never met a single human being in my life that can read a book one time and retain it. I've never happened. People will say that to me. Wow, how do you retain so much? What I'll do is, if I'm reading a history book, I find history to be the hardest thing to remember. So what I'll try to do is extract the essence. What is important about what I'm reading here? So I read the other day about the history of the Declaration of Independence. And something that struck out to me, because I'd never read it before, was that was actually standard legal practice at the time. If you were getting independence from a country, breaking away, was you put out a declaration. I never knew that.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So out of everything I read, I made sure I isolate that. Right? Because that I want to remember for the future, right? So things of that nature, speeches, Patrick Henry's speech, give me liberty or give me death. The principles involved in that speech make me isolate it, commit it to memory. But I don't know anybody that can remember everything. But a lot of those books I mentioned that I've read, I had to read multiple times. Human Action, 3-4 times. I've forced myself to read The Critique of Pure Reason twice. That's enough of that. But
so you are one of the few people in our movement who I consider is, quote, allowed to speak about Kant. I never speak about Kant because I haven't read him.
So oh my God, that drives me crazy. That drives me crazy.
Kant is the worst person in history. Sorry, I can't. I can't say yes or no because I haven't read him. I've actually read stuff like the Defense of the Enlightenment, which definitely doesn't allow me to say he's the worst person in history. I mean, I understand why people could say that based on what they claim he said, but if I haven't read it, how can I go out there and say Kant is the worst person in human history?
Right. So that drives me crazy that people do that. People actually got mad at me on Facebook because I said you should not be critiquing philosophers you have not read. And they basically said to me, well, Ayn Rand said, and I trust her. And I'm just like, that is, first of all, she would never have done that, right? She would not accept that. That's the first thing. But, you know, when I was reading Ayn Rand over and over and over again, the name Kant kept coming up. So I said, okay, I have to read Kant. This is his magnum opus, The Critique of Pure Reason. Even recently, when it came time to debate the ethics of Kant with somebody, I went and I got Groundwork for the Metaphysics of Morals, or the Foundations for the Metaphysics of Morals. It's called different things, but it's translation. Forced myself to read that. I have to read it if I'm going to critique it. John Maynard Keynes kept coming up in the free market stuff that I had. So I went out and I got myself a copy of The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. I have to read this and understand it for myself. I also bought Henry Hazlitt's book, The Failure of the New Economics, so I would have both. When I bought The Conscience of a Conservative by Barry Goldwater, I bought The Conscience of a Liberal by Paul Krugman. When critical race theory, everybody was running off at the mouth about it. I would see it on TV, the pundits. I went out and I bought the big book of the writings of the critical race theorists. I also found out that they were descendants from the Frankfurt School. So I went out and I bought Max Horkheimer. I forgot, there was a few other guys in that tradition from the Frankfurt School, and made myself read that. I just don't.
Here, I see. Actually, I was checking it recently because I did an episode with Yaron. So, yeah, you can
Herbert Marcuse, yes.
Yeah, you cannot talk about woke Marxism and have such strong opinions if at least you haven't bothered to see what these guys are saying.
Yeah.
Like, even if you watch the episode of me and Yaron, that's not good enough to go out and say, now I have an opinion about Frankfurt School. I might be bullshitting people. So people should have some sense of first-handed knowledge.
Look it. I know that I get things wrong, right? Even after reading things, I can get things wrong. Why would I assume that Nikos or Yaron can't get things wrong ever? And just so you say something and now I'm out repeating it, and then somebody that actually knows better says, no, that's not true. And then I look like the idiot. No, I would rather just read the stuff for myself. It doesn't mean I can't benefit from your take and learn from it, right? And then when I read it, I can say, okay, here's where Nikos was right. I think Nikos might be wrong about this. You wrote, what was it? A recent Substack article on the freedom movement, the sense of urgency. And Mark and I discussed it on the show. And what did I do immediately? After we covered it on the show, I texted you, hey, did we get this right? Because I know there's a chance I could be getting it wrong.
No, this happened literally before the show was... Like, before I closed YouTube after the show, immediately you texted me, did I get this right? Getting back to the volume of the stuff that you are reading, would you say you're a good reader? You're a fast reader? Because even with the things that you're telling me, this still sounds inconceivable quantity, volume of stuff for a normal person to read.
I don't know if I'm a fast reader, because it's not like I'm side by side with other people that are reading the exact same book.
Let me ask it differently. Let's say you read this. Would you read every line, or at some point it's like, okay, what's this chapter about? The start of the chapter, the end of the chapter?
No, I've developed a habit, and I actually don't recommend this, but because I wanted to be able, every book I read, I wrote down. And I wouldn't be able to write it down if I didn't read the whole thing. So I would force myself to read the whole thing. But that's probably counterproductive, because there's probably things that are unnecessary to read. You know what I mean? But at the same time, how do you know it's not necessary to read if you haven't read it?
Well, it's easier, for example, with history books. So the way I do research is mostly I do research either to become an expert or because I want to talk about something. And in that case, it's easier to filter if this is something relevant or if this is something not relevant. But yeah, as you said, it's not ideal because you might miss something important. For example, I'm preparing this is not an advertisement, but I'm preparing a deep dive with my Patreon community on Ronald Reagan. And you know how much, by doing the deep dive, how many things people get wrong about Reagan. But sometimes there are small things, and you have to find a small story. So everyone thinks Reagan brought Christian conservatism to the right. No, Christian conservatism was there, and then Reagan happens to be the candidate. But whoever was the candidate would ride that wave. But if you didn't go deep into details to read like that type of biographies of Reagan, you never come across this. So yes, particularly when you want to deeply understand something, it's a lot of work. It's not easy. Not everyone should do it. Maybe each has his own priorities in life. But if you want to claim any type of expertise, it is tough work. And I see it also in other areas in life. It pisses me off so much when I hear sports journalists make mistakes or say stupid takes, which would take like 5 minutes. This is your profession. How can it be that me, the amateur, I know more about you, that this is your job, this is your life?
I couldn't agree more. That's a pet peeve of mine. I don't know. When people, and it's not that I don't ever do it because I'm not infallible, but I really go out of my way to not speak about things that I don't know about. And I just think it's important. It's important for my own psychology to be confident in what I'm talking about, but it's also important in promoting my own interest because the audience understands that I'm going to do a deep dive, and it's important for me to provide the audience with a good product, that I'm not lying to them. So I'll often say on the show, fact check me. If you think I'm wrong, go fact check me. When it's matters of fact, I'm very rarely going to be wrong. Now, my assessment, my analysis, that can be wrong, but it's very rare that I'm going to make a factual error. Mark and I, when we covered the Iran war recently, I didn't want to talk about it until I went and actually read up on the Iran war. What influenced it? What actually happened in 53? What happened before 53? What was the Iranian Revolution? In what ways has Iran attacked American interest? In what ways has America attacked Iranian interest? And what I found was that, first of all, Iran's not a good, these aren't good people. The Iranian regime I'm talking about. But it's not this simple story of the United States was just over here minding our business, and all of a sudden Iran just started attacking us for 47 years, and we're just sitting back going, why is this happening? Right? Now, we could still say Iran's the bad guy in that situation, but I don't know how it helps the case when you don't just tell the truth and put all the facts out there.
And at least bother to know the facts. So in the same way that I tell leftists, guys, I'm not going to have a serious discussion with you if you don't know, at least when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict, if I give you the dates 48, 56, 67, 73, if these dates don't at least trigger something to you, it's a waste of that. Similarly with Iran. Again, it's very easy to say Iran are the bad guys. Okay. But if we are to have a serious discussion, this requires some more serious knowledge. Otherwise, you know what we need? We need 5 slogans, and then we can go through our life with these 5 slogans. Iran, bad, but then, and again, it's okay if you're an engineer and your career is an engineer and you want to have some relationship to reality, what's happening out there, that's probably enough. But if you claim to be an intellectual, and if you claim, like we're asking people to give us their time, they could be listening to Neil Ferguson or to whoever other experts out there, and we're asking them, listen to us, we have something to say. This is a big claim. This is a big ask. You should give something to make this claim, listen to me.
Right. So it's interesting you bring up the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, because I'll often say I really don't want to get too much into it because there's a lot I don't know, right? And people will say, oh my God, you haven't read about it? No, I've read plenty. But I haven't kept up over the years with everything happening over there. I don't know much about the settlers and the interactions with the locals in the West Bank. But you threw out some dates, right? So 48, the UN declares Israel a country. 6 Arab countries, or rather, I think 5 Arab countries.
6 countries, 5 armies. I also get confused all the time.
Invade. 1956, the war over the Suez Canal, where the French and the Americans basically sell the Israelis out. Then you have 67, of course, is the 6-Day War, the preemptive strike on the Egyptians. 73, the Yom Kippur War. I know all that stuff easily, right? And still, I don't feel myself confident enough to get dragged into a full-on discussion about the history of the conflict. But people who don't even know that will do so.
And they are not to be taken seriously. Again, I have many examples from sports that it's not going to mean anything to you or maybe to your audience because most of them are for football. But sometimes there is a very easy tell that you're talking about with people who, it's not that they don't know, that they don't care to know. For me, not knowing is not the problem. But if I see that you're not, so a good question to ask people is there a chance you're going to change your mind? If I have this, oh my God, these days, there's this discussion, who is the greatest of all time in football, Messi or Ronaldo? For me, there's not even a discussion. But if you get bogged into such a discussion, you should, before you get bogged, a good question before is there any chance you're going to change your mind? If the answer is no, you are wasting your time. And the same happens in other issues. Like it's open to me that I could change my mind when it comes, let's say, to the issue of the settlers in the West Bank. That, you know, it's a topic that me myself I haven't studied, and it might cast a shadow into how I view that particular aspect of the conflict. So I don't speak about this issue. Let me make it even more triggering. I don't debate abortion. It's not I mean, I sense I get it, but the truth is I don't properly get it. I haven't properly understood the argument how something is okay at 5 minutes past 12, this thing hasn't got rights, but 6 minutes past 12, this thing has rights. And it's a thing, but then it's a human being. I will never discuss it publicly, because, or maybe one day I will, if I put the energy and I manage to understand it. Till now, I haven't managed to understand it, so I'm not going to discuss it.
Let me just throw some things at you about abortion real quick. And I don't want you to discuss it. I just want to show you how it complicates it. And it's befuddled me often in my life, is this. Okay, the argument is that, you know, in the objectivist circles, a potentiality isn't an actuality. A fetus is a potential life. It's not an actual life. So we're precluded from arguing potential. That's that. Okay. Why do human beings have rights? Human beings have rights ultimately because we're moral beings. Why are we moral beings? Because of our conceptual faculty and the, which is volitional, and we have to make choices and discoveries about what's good for us, right? A baby is not volitional. A baby is not making choices. A baby is not discovering, a conceptual knowledge. A baby is not a moral entity. You don't judge the baby morally. So how does a baby have rights? And I've had objectivists tell me, well, it's potential. You're precluded from arguing potential. You've already said that I can't argue against abortion based on the fact that a fetus is potential life. So how does a baby have rights based on the fact that it has the potential to eventually be a volitional moral entity? The question is complex. Ultimately, I've come down on the side of pro-choice for a couple of reasons. One is Murray Rothbard actually convinced me, and I know, God, not Murray, but Murray Rothbard said, even if you argue that a child has rights, nobody has the right to live as a parasite on another human being's body.
Me too. That was the thing in my libertarian phase that registered it for me.
Yeah. That, and I have to say, I agree with it. Two is, do I trust the government to make these kind of decisions for people? And the answer is no. So I come down on the side of pro-choice. But I do find when people act as if it's such a simple topic, it's not. And in the objectivist canon, there's no theory of children's rights. There is nothing out there that goes into detail about why children have rights, about why they don't have rights, about how to deal with that issue. There's nothing. And that, I mean, it's okay. Ayn Rand didn't address it, but that means that it's open to me, it's open for discussion within that, within the broader scope of objectivism.
No, I totally get what you mean. And my instinctive take, let's say, it's pro-choice. But this is not saying my gut tells me this is not good enough. So maybe it's good enough in terms of, how I understand the legislation or whatever, but I will never go out there and make a case on something that myself, I cannot grasp. Anyway, so that we don't completely go off track, I have one last question. What is your perfect productive day, to put it this way? What time? But I want details, like what time it starts. So, for example, let me tell you something. When I start my day only with coffee, I can be productive for 2 days. When I start my day and I have coffee and breakfast, then basically the whole day is ruined. So it's like this, or I read Atomic Habits, reread, because I've read in the past. And then for some days, it's like, everything's very good. But then I go back into, so at the end of the day, we all know what works and what makes us productive. The question is, do we have the the power of will to do what we know is good. So what is your what is your proper productive day? Your ideal productive day?
Oh God, I don't know. That's a tough one to answer because we also need recreation as human beings, right? Like we could just work ourselves into
But
the
that would
ground.
be a different question. That would be what's with
Right.
your
So, but it's
proper
hard for
recreation
me.
day.
So, I didn't mention earlier when we talked about prison. I also helped to write one book and wrote another one. While I was in there. And I remember when I would write, say, for 8 hours in a day, that would feel so productive to me. Like I would feel, wow, I accomplished something. And now, when I make sure that I'm all read for all the articles for the Capitalist Corner, and I put on a good show with Mark on the Capitalist Corner, and then I'm doing my day job as well, and then at nighttime I get a half hour reading done and a little bit of reading in the mix during the day, I feel like I've gotten a good day. I wish that I was well off and that I could just devote all my time to this. I'd probably be a lot further, but ultimately I have to support myself. So that takes a considerable amount of time away. Now, this may be going a little off track, but like when you think about funding, the problem with funding is I feel like if you get funded from somebody, in a sense, you belong to them. And I don't mean that like that. I just mean that now, am I saying something that's going to offend that person? What do I have to do? And I found myself doing that one time. I had a debate with Andrew Wilson, and he asked me a question about incest. And in the back of my mind was, how are other objectivists going to view that I'm engaging in this debate? And it screwed up my entire thought process, right? I couldn't address the issue properly because my mind was half somewhere else, that other objectivists aren't going to like this. And I could only imagine that if somebody else was paying me to do this, how that occurs. And it only has to happen in slight ways. I like saying what I want to say when I want to say it, right? And I bring that in because when we're talking about productive days, I can't devote all my time to this, which is what I would want to do. So my production is split. So I'll do, say, 6 or 7 reports for my boss in a day, get 2-3 hours reading done in the morning. Plus I work out every day, and I do the show with Mark, and I get my own reading done. To me, that's productive. I don't like to count exactly how many hours are in there.
So
maybe I should.
Normally, the first thing you do in the day is your most productive day. Your most productive task, or it should be. Is this your money making stuff, the reports for the real estate work, or is it your reading?
No, I make money off the reports. This, to me, this is my career.
Yeah, but I mean,
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So the first thing you do in the morning is, let's say, your money-making job, or the readings that you do for your intellectual development.
I can't do, so the reports, it's not like I just wake up in the morning and have a list of reports. The reports can come to me at any time. So sometimes my boss will send them to me at 8 a.m. Sometimes I won't get them till 1 p.m. Sometimes I'll be like, okay, good. I have nothing left to do for the rest of the day. I can just focus on this. And then I'll get a text. There'll be 5 reports to do, 15 permits each. And now my whole day has to be devoted to that. That's one of the reasons I like to get up very early in the morning, because I know my boss won't start sending me reports. The very earliest he's going to start is 7:30, 8 o'clock. Right.
So what time do you get up?
Anywhere. Well, this morning I got up at 2, but but even earlier than that. But normally I get up at between 4:30 and 6 every morning.
With an alarm clock or by yourself?
No, I just wake up. I have very hard time sleeping. So I take advantage of the insomnia. So I usually wake up 4:30. The latest I'll wake up is 5:40, because that's when my girlfriend gets up to go to work. So 5:40 is the latest I'll be.
And what time do you sleep?
There's no. I try to get to sleep at like 9, but sometimes I won't fall asleep until 11. Sometimes I'll fall asleep at 9, wake up at 10, and can't get back to sleep till 2.
One quick inside joke for objectives for Insomnia. The Randian hero or villain, depends how you view it, with whom I had the most immediate connection was when Ayn Rand says about Gail Wynand, something like he never slept more than 5 hours in his adult life. And I was reading this while I was in a very bad insomnia phase. I was like, he's my brother. See, you can sleep only 5 hours and still achieve things in life. But yeah, I also think that in insomniac phases I read more, but overall life sucks so much that I wouldn't recommend to people to sacrifice.
Well, this phase has lasted more than 20 years, so I don't know that I'm in an insomniac phase.
Well, it's okay. I think the most important thing with that is not to overthink it. If you start worrying about that, then it becomes even worse. And you have all these people, if you don't sleep 8 hours for 2 nights, you're going to get all sorts of sickness. Like, tune this out, guys. Tune this out. I mean, even if it's true, it's not going to help in any way. So tune it out.
Look, I got, I think, combined 4.5, 5 hours sleep last night. I knew I had to do this. I know I have to do 12 o'clock with Mark. And whether I got 8 hours sleep or a half hour sleep, these things have to get done. So sitting around saying to myself, oh, I'm so tired, this sucks, which I'll probably do when we go off. I'll mope around, I'll eat my lunch, but then come noon, I'm back at it. It has to get done. What am I going to do? Nobody else is going to do it for me. So sleep or no sleep, I got to get done what I got to get done.
This episode, I'm going to, I'm going to find a way to have it somewhere there. I think so if people found something in this episode, I would recommend they return to it after a month or two, because quite often, we get this boost. Oh, there's all this potential. There's all these things and then somehow you let it go. Somehow you let it, and you go back to the low expectation stuff. Anyway, I have the list here with the things I wanted to ask. I think this was all. Me taking over your show and interviewing you. I have one more request.
Okay.
At some point, take your phone. Have you seen how Ryan Holiday does tours of his library?
Who?
Ryan Holiday, the Stoic guy. So anyway, he has this video where he goes and shows us his books. Have you got all these books that you've read? Have you got them in physical form, or are they Kindle and stuff?
They were physical form, but in prison, you have very limited space. So I've given away hundreds of books.
So you don't have a library with...
I've kept... So in 2005, right, my mother told me that my father wanted to buy me a chain, because you can get a chain in prison, because he wanted something that I can remember him by. I told my mother, I don't value chains. If you want to get me something to remember him by and remember you by, get me books. That's what I want. So we had a big argument about this, and ultimately they sent me 3 books. They sent me this one here, Capitalism, a Treatise on Economics by George Reisman, and Faith and Freedom by Thomas Saz. Inside of those books, I write, let me make sure I get it right, GBMD, given by mom and dad. And so after that, I developed the habit. Every time they sent me books, I wrote that on the inside. And then when my sister would send me books, I'd write given by sister. Those are the books I've saved. So any books that I got from my parents, they're dead now, but I wrote that on the inside and I kept them. So those books I all have. I mean, I have them all, and I have a few other books, because people send me books now if they're coming on the show. Here, read my book. So then I have to read that book. So I have a bunch of those as well.
I see.
But I don't have anything like what you have behind you. I don't have the space. I live in one room.
Well, if I ever, so my goal, because I'm not in a position now where I can afford the physical books of all the books I'm reading. My goal when I make a lot of money is first to find a proper home. And the second is to buy all the books that I have in Kindle in physical books, and at one time have a library with all the books. there's something to it. There's something to it. Anyway, Michael, this was the things I wanted to ask you, and I think this is an episode where again I'll return to it. Any parting words from your side?
This is the Rational Alternative. Mark Pellegrino and I also have a flagship show, noon to 1 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, where we discuss current events from a pro-capitalist perspective. On the Rational Alternative, we also have members-only content, and we're going to have a lot more to come. And I look forward to having Nikos on again to give us his commentary. Nikos, where can people find you?
Look, it's the nikos.org, but the truth is Twitter and YouTube. That's where I live. That is the stuff that I'm proud of. Check me on Twitter, check my channel on YouTube, and also check the collaborations I do with Yaron Brook lately. And I'm saying this because it's stuff that I would like to watch them even if I was not there as a viewer. It's also like this episode that my criteria is, would I want to watch this if I was not there? And there are few pieces of content that pass this stuff. So these are the stuff that I appreciate extra.
Awesome. Nikos, thank you so much. Again, this is our inaugural episode of doing podcasts on the Rational Alternative. Many, many more to come. For now, I'm Michael Liebowitz signing out. Till next time.